Washington. This is in California area. He's got a mic, and he's going around to different people, and he starts asking them, hey, are you getting ready for Memorial Day? And they're nodding their heads and everything. They're excited about it. And he's got the mic in their face, and he's saying, what are you going to do on Memorial Day? And they start talking about how they're going to have a cookout, how they're going to do a barbecue, and all these sorts of things. And then he asks them, okay, what is the purpose of Memorial Day? What are we celebrating? What are we honoring? And then the people just get this blank look. They have no clue. And they're just, I'm not sure, man. I don't know. He goes to other people, and he starts talking about it, and he says, hey, you getting ready for Memorial Day? Yeah, where we celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence, all the fireworks and everything. And the people he's talking to, they're just nodding and going along with it. Yeah, celebrating the Declaration, and yeah, that's a big day in our family. They have no clue. He goes to some people, and this blew my mind. He goes to some people, and he's really kind of, he's playing the part. He's kind of walking, he looks kind of like a surfer when he's doing this. And he says, hey man, you getting ready to celebrate Memorial Day? And they're nodding their heads, they're agreeing, they're saying yes. And he says, yeah, Memorial Day, you know what that's for, right? And they kind of get that blank look. And he says, where they honor the surfers that gave their lives for that great cause so that we have the freedom to surf. And the people there, they just, oh yeah, I have a family member in Hawaii. They know some of those big surfers. Totally clueless. They had no clue, no idea what Memorial Day was about. Memorial Day. What does it mean? To some, it means cookouts and barbecue. To some, it's a day off of work, a long weekend. To others, it's just a kickoff to summer. And as one man put it in that video I saw, it's just another bogus holiday. Just a bogus holiday. But what is it really about? It began in 1866. The custom of placing flowers on the graves of the war began on May 5th, 1866 in Waterloo, New York. And Waterloo has been recognized by Congress as the official birthplace of Memorial Day. It has that because there's about, I think it was 7 different cities that claimed they started Memorial Day. In 1868, General John A. Logan, then President of the Grand Army of the Republic, declared that May 30th would be a day to decorate with flowers the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, talking about the Civil War. After World War I, the day was set aside to honor the graves of all American wars, and the custom was extended to pay homage to deceased relatives and friends, both military and civilian. So Memorial Day, it's a day of remembrance. It's a day of remembering those who have fallen in battle, remembering all loved ones who have died. Our text today is taken from Joshua chapter 14, a text from a book of battles. Today I want to talk to you about, as Christians, things we need to remember. Joshua chapter 14, starting in verse 6, it says, Then the children of Judah came unto Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said unto him, Thou knowest the thing that the Lord said unto Moses, the man of God, concerning me and thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought him word again as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses sware on that day, saying, Surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thine inheritance, and thy children's forever, because thou hast wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord hath kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, even since the Lord spake this word unto Moses, while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, lo, I am this day 85 old. He's 85. As yet I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now, for war both to go out and to come in. Now therefore give me this mountain, whereof the Lord spake in that day. For thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be the Lord will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. And Joshua blessed him, and gave unto Caleb the son of Jephunneh Hebron for an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite unto this day, because that he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. Dear Father, thank you for giving me the opportunity to preach this morning. I ask, Lord, that you fill me with your Holy Ghost. Give me the words that you want me to say. I pray that each and every person in here gets something from the message we can take and apply in our lives. Lord, as Christians, there's things we ought to remember, Lord, and please remind us of those today. In your name we pray. Amen. Our text is from a book of battles. If you remember Joseph, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was a grandson of Abraham, and he was sold into slavery by his brothers. They despised him. He was the dreamer. And God allowed him to be sold into slavery. He went into prison. And then through God's hand, he ended up being in second command of the nation of Egypt. God allowed that to happen so he could preserve his people. He brought his family into Egypt. And over the years, they multiplied. Years pass and Joseph is dead. Pharaoh's rise, Pharaoh's fall. Well, a new Pharaoh comes to power, and the Bible talks about one that knew not Joseph. He didn't know Joseph. This man, he put the Israelites into slavery. He saw how many there were. He put them into slavery. Now the Israelites are into slavery. Now Moses comes into the picture. He's a Hebrew. His mother hid him in a basket, and God allowed Pharaoh's own daughter to take him into her home. He's raised by the best schools in Egypt. At the same time, his mother is able to come in and teach him as well, teach him doctrine and Bible. And Moses, God has a job for Moses. He's appointed Moses to lead God's people out of Egypt. Moses, he goes in, he brings them out of Egypt. They come to the promised land, the land that God has promised Abraham. It was promised to Abraham. It is their inheritance. God brings them to that point. And Moses, he sends in 12 spies to spy out the land. They go throughout the land, and they're taking note of everything that's there. They're picking up the fruit. They take a cluster of grapes that they have to stretch between two men on a staff. They're going through there, and they just know how rich, how fertile the land is. They say it's flowing with milk and honey. It's a good land. And they come back, and they give a report. These 12 spies, there was one representative from each tribe. 2 spies come back, and they have a good report. There's Joshua and there's Caleb. They come back, and they say, it is overflowing with blessings. It is rich. It is fertile. It's flowing with milk and honey. This is a land God has given to us. Let's go in and let's take it. On the other side, the 10 other spies, they come back. And if you remember in our passage in Joshua, it says that their words, it melted the hearts of the people. They start talking about it. Oh, yes, the fruit is great. Yes, it's flowing with milk and honey. Yes, it's rich and fertile. But there's giants in the land. If you'll look at Numbers chapter 14 with me. Numbers chapter 14 with me. We'll be going back and forth between Numbers and Joshua. Numbers chapter 14, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4. It says, "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt." These people have just been taken out of slavery. They are now free, and they come to the point where they're about to go into their promised land, their inheritance. They saw God part the Red Sea. They saw God do these miracles. They're about to go into this land, and now they're starting to whine and cry, oh, if we had just died. Or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return unto Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. These people, they're so discouraged by these 10 spies. These 10 spies come back. Joshua and Caleb, they're on fire. Man, it's a good land. Let's go. It's what God has given to us. They're trusting in God. But these 10 other spies, they're, oh man, the giants, the enemy, they're too strong. We can't do it. Because of the response of the people. Because of the response of the people, there was 2 things that happened. First of all, God did not allow them to go in the promised land at this time. They would have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years because of a lack of faith in God. Also, from 20 years old and upward, they would not enter into the promised land. Anybody who is 20 years or older at this time, they could not enter into the promised land. They couldn't go into it. That would not be their home. The wilderness would be their home. They'd live there and die there in the wilderness. The only 2 exceptions were Joshua and Caleb. And as we read in our passage, at the end of those 40 years, Caleb, he was ready to go. Caleb, he says, give me this mountain. He asked for the most difficult task. If you still have your hand in Numbers chapter, if you'll turn to chapter 13, verse 33. It says, and there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Okay, I want you to note the sons of Anak, they're the giants. Joshua chapter 14, verse 12 says, this is Caleb speaking, now therefore give me this mountain, whereof the Lord spake in that day. For thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be the Lord will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. This morning I want to take a look at what motivated Caleb to press on. What motivated him to press on? Caleb, he's 85 years old. The ones they were talking about, the giants, they were the sons of Anak. Now he's saying the mountain where those giants are, the mountain where those the sons of Anak are, that's what I want. God can deliver it into my hand. First of all, what motivated Caleb to press on? He remembers God's promise to him. He remembers God's promise to him. Look at Joshua chapter 14, verses 6 and 7. It says, then the children of Judah came unto Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said unto him, thou knowest the thing that the Lord said unto Moses, the man of God, concerning me and thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought him word again as it was in mine heart. He remembers God's promise to him. First of all, we have Caleb the spy. He's 40 years old. He goes in and he comes back with that good report. It's flowing with milk and honey. Let me read a verse to you. It's Exodus chapter 3:8. God was talking to Moses. It says, and I come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land unto a good land and a large... let me back up. And to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, that meaning the land, it's rich and fertile. This is a promise God gave to Moses. Can you imagine as Moses is leading God's children, he's leading them from Egypt to Israel, he's sharing his dream, his vision with them. God has given us a land, and he keeps repeating over and over, a land flowing with milk and honey. He keeps repeating it over and over. And Caleb and Joshua, they come back, they go into the land, they see it. Man, that is no joke. It God has really blessed this place. They come back and they say the same phrase that Moses says. This is what God has given to us. And the people, they've seen what God has done, and they chose not to act on it. We have Caleb, the believer. The majority had great giants and a little God. Numbers chapter 13, verses 28 through 33 says, Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. Notice this. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Caleb, he's there. He sees the murmuring and everything. Hey, quiet. Listen. Let me have your attention. God has given it to us. We can overcome it. We can take it. He was trusting in God. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. The majority had great giants and a little God. This is what God has promised to them. This is the promised land. This is what God has promised Abram all those years ago. They forgot what God has just done in Egypt, the plagues that he put on the Egyptians, and the Israelites were not touched by them. The death angel that flew in through the camp and took the firstborn of every son, unless they had the blood on the doorpost. The being chased by Pharaoh's army, and how God protected them with a wall while they were backed up against the Red Sea. Then the Red Sea parts and they walk across on dry ground. This has all just happened. They're walking through the Red Sea. They get to the other side, and Pharaoh's army starts coming through the Red Sea, and God takes out all of Pharaoh's army. The waters just fall right back on them. They have just recently seen this. And now they come to this new land. They're giants. We can't do it. We can't do it. They're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. We can't do it. They were focused on the problem. They were focused on the giants and not focused on God. Caleb, though, he had a great God and little giants. Numbers 14:8-9 says, If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed unto them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. Caleb, he put his trust in the Lord. He saw the blessings of the land. He also saw the obstacles of giants, but he knew his God was bigger than those giants. His faith was in God. The majority were problem conscious, but Caleb was power conscious. You know, at times, aren't we the same way? As we're going through life, we get into the daily routine of things, and a problem comes our way. And instead of doing what we ought to do, we've seen God do great things in our past. We've seen him answer prayer requests that could not happen unless it was the hand of God. We've seen him touch our lives. We've seen how he's touched other lives. And now a new problem comes in our life, and instead of going straight to God and saying, God, here's another one I know you can handle, we look at the problem and, oh my word, I don't know how I'm going to handle that. That's too big. I've never dealt with anything like that before. And instead of focusing on God, where we've seen what he's done, we're focusing on that problem. We shouldn't be focused on the problem. We ought to be focused on God. But oftentimes we forget about God. We need to take the time to remember some of God's promises to us. Hebrews 13:5-6 says, Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. God has promised never to leave us nor forsake us. That we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. You know, whatever the problem is, God's right there with us. He's not going to leave us. All we have to do, instead of getting anxious about it, instead of getting fearful about it when that problem comes, just turn to Him. God, I've seen you do a whole lot more than that. This is in your hands. I'm trusting you. Caleb, when it came time to it, he sees those giants. You know what? They're giants. You're right. They're big guys. But God, I've seen you do so much greater. You did that with the Red Sea. These guys are nothing for you. He will never leave us nor forsake us. We need to remember this promise, Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. You know, when bad things start happening, God's still in control. He's still in control. We just need to leave it in His hands. Or how about this? Psalm 34:17. The righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all their troubles. He's right there. He's just waiting for us to call. He's listening. He knows a problem happening in our life, and we're sitting there worried about it and fretting about it, and He's standing there just waiting, watching. I can help you with that problem, Matthew. I've dealt with bigger than this. You know what I've done in your past. And all I have to do is turn to Him. He's just waiting for me to turn to Him. He's listening for me. So Caleb, he remembers the promises that he was given back 45 years ago. And now he's going to stand on those promises. Numbers 14:24 says, But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him will I bring into the land whereinto he went, and his seed shall possess it. He's never going to forget those promises. He came back with a good report. The people believed the 10 spies with the bad report. And so God has promised he's going to live to see that land. He's not going to die off. He has an inheritance there. And during those 40 years in the wilderness, he's hanging on to those promises. God, I'm hanging on to these promises. I believe you. I'm trusting in you. I've seen what you can do. And I'm just going to rely on you. I'm just going to trust in you. You'll never find Caleb as part of the grumbling crowd. During the next 40 years, he is on his way to this better land. He keeps pressing on. He has his eyes on the goal. He remembers God's promises. What else motivated Caleb to press on? Caleb remembers his own commitment to the Lord. Joshua 14, verses 8 through 9. It says, Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses sware on that day, saying, Surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thine inheritance, and thy children's forever, because thou hast wholly followed the Lord my God. I wholly followed the Lord. Caleb was reminded of the time of his full surrender to Christ. What does it mean to be fully surrendered? Fully surrendered. Fully surrendered means it means a total faith. And we can see that in Caleb. He's ready at 40 years old. He's trusting in God. He's totally relying on God to deal with the giants. 45 years later, he's 85. He's still fully relying on God. He's ready to go. God, we're about to go in the promised land. We can take that mountain. I want that mountain. And it's up to you, God. You can give me the strength to do it. He's totally relying on God. Full surrender. It means total obedience. It means, whatever you say, God, I'm going to do. If you want me to give this up, God, I'll do that. God, if you want me to start working in this ministry, if you want me to start acting this way, if you want me to stop talking like this, if you want me to do this here, God, whatever you say, I am willing to do it because I am fully surrendered to you. Caleb, he was fully surrendered to God. And because of it, he had much opposition. He's one of 2 spies that come back with a good report. He's one of 12 spies that come back total. There's 10 spies that are against him. 10 spies that are rolling their eyes at Caleb. He's saying, we can do it, we can go. And they're there, they're arguing, they're rolling their eyes, they're getting into shouting matches. No, we can't. You're going to slaughter us all, Caleb. Caleb, if we go in there and follow you, we're all going to die. Those giants are just too big. Because of his full surrender, he had much opposition. And you know, when a person is fully surrendered to God, there's going to be opposition there. But during that time, we just have to remember God's bigger than our opposition. We can rely on him. Because he was fully surrendered to God, yes, he had much opposition, but then he reaped great blessings. Think about this. He got to see things his peers never saw. Those 10 other spies, they died soon after getting back. But Caleb, man, he lived for years and years. He got to go into the promised land. Joshua and Caleb were the oldest 2 Israelites there. They get to see everything. Why? He was fully surrendered to God. And his inheritance, if you remember back in Joshua chapter 9, surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thine inheritance. Wherever Caleb's walked, that's his inheritance. Man, how far did he walk? That's a huge blessing. Why? Because he was fully surrendered to God. Caleb, he chose to be a man of God. He said, I wholly followed the Lord my God. He was totally dedicated. He was totally committed to God. He remembers how he had stood apart from the crowd. For Caleb, this was a day of personal victory. This was a day he took a stand for God, even though it was an unpopular stand. Even though there was 10 other people against him and one other guy, he still stood up for what was right. Do you remember this was a personal victory in his life, this day. Do you remember having a personal victory like that in your life? Maybe where you took a stand, you chose to do something right, you chose to take a stand when no one else would. What about the day you were saved? That's a victory you can count in your life. You're on your way to hell, you're on your way to hell, but then someone came and told you about Christ, you put your trust in Christ, and now your directions completely change. You're a totally different person. You're on your way to heaven. You serve a new master. That's a day of victory we can look back to. That's a day of victory we can remember. What about a time of full surrender? Has there ever been a time where you wholly followed the Lord? A time of total surrender. When you said, God, whatever you say, whatever you want, I'll do it. I am completely yours. This reminds me of the church of Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2. It says, I'll read the first 7 verses. It says, unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. I know thy works, and thy labor, and thy patience, and how thou cannot bear them that are evil, and thou hast tried them which say they are apostles, and are not, and hast found them liars, and hast borne and hast patience, and for my name's sake hast labored, and hast not fainted. Here, this is God telling John what to write, and he's mentioning all these good things this church did. Hey, you've done this, and you've done this, and you've done all these good things. But in the next verse, he says, nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. Thou hast left thy first love. You know, if there's ever a time where, when we're saved, that's one of the most exciting days in our life. If we truly get a grasp on what just happened, man, we're on our way to heaven now. That's a day of excitement. And the next thing you want to do, you want to go and tell your family, and you're telling everyone about it. And a couple years pass, and you've kind of wizened up and gotten a little bit mature spiritually, and you're not as open about your faith anymore. And you're not communicating it like you once were. And you're not trying to reach your coworkers and your family like you once did. And God says, I want you to go back to that first love. I want you to go back when you first got saved, when you first made that decision, that victory in your life. I want you to go back. I want you to remember that. That's how I want you to feel. We need to go back to that. What motivated Caleb to press on? Next, Caleb remembers God's faithfulness to him. Judges 14:10 and 11 say, "And now, behold, the Lord hath kept me alive, as he said, these 40 and 5 years, even since the Lord spake this word unto Moses, while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, lo, I am this day 85 old. And yet I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now, for war, both to go out and to come in." He's thankful God had kept him alive. Except for Joshua, everyone else his age, anybody else, all his peers, they had died. But he was thankful to God for his protection. He was thankful to God he was alive. Have you thanked God for his protection lately? Say you're running late for work or something for reasons beyond your control, and you finally find your keys, you get in your car, and you're on your way, and as you're going to work, you see there's an accident right there, and you see the cop pull up, and if you had left just a minute sooner, that could have been you. Do you take the time to thank God for his protection? I think back growing up in Madison, Alabama. We were missionaries to Uganda, Africa, and while we were on deputation, we lived in this missions house right there next to the church. And some of our best friends were, his name was Stephen, and her name was Karen, and I was probably in 3rd grade or so. And their mom was the secretary at the church. And they'd come over. My mom was pregnant with either Joel or Nick, and they'd come over. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning. They're knocking. My mom's still asleep. Man, we're excited to have them come in. We opened the door. We weren't supposed to, but we let them come in, and we're playing and everything. We go upstairs, and we're jumping around and everything. My mom yells at us, and so we quiet down. Well, the way the house was laid out, the parents' bedroom was down, is on the first floor and is at the end of a hallway. And if you go up the stairs, there's a little door there, about the perfect size for a child. And we open it up, and it's the attic there. And they opened it up one day, and they're like, "Hey, have you seen this?" They'd explored the whole building before. And we're walking into the attic and everything, and we're being quiet so my mom doesn't know about it. We go farther into the attic. I don't know how she heard us, maybe because we're right above her and because 3rd graders can't be quiet. But she came upstairs, and we got in so much trouble for that. But that was some of my closest friends, Stephen and Karen. Throughout the years, we went to Uganda, Africa as missionaries, and we lost touch with them. When we came back, they were still there at the school, and we did not get along. We weren't friends. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. And his senior year, he is there at the school. He goes out and he to some sort of party. He ends up getting drunk. He gets kicked out of school, and at times, I check up on him from once in a while, and he's kind of made a mess of his life. And I look at that, and I say, God, I'm so thankful for God's protection in that. That was my best friend. We did everything together. But God took me away. I went to Uganda, Africa, and I consider, in a way, that was God protecting me. Because only by the grace of God, I'd be right there with him. I would have gotten kicked out of school. I wouldn't be right here today. And, it was God's protection. We need to think about that. We need to thank him for his protection every once in a while. Caleb, he's a super senior citizen. He's 85 years old, and he's ready to go into battle. As yet, I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me 45 years ago. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war, both to go out and to come in. Caleb, he's ready for war. He's ready to conquer. He's ready to enter the promised land. He remembers God's promises, and he's ready to claim them. We have a faithful God. He's thankful to God for his faithfulness. He's ready to go. He's thanking God, and our God is so faithful. He's faithful to us when we're not faithful to him. He's faithful to keep his promises. He's faithful in his chastising. Man, that doesn't sound good. Man, you're thankful that he chastens you, he gets onto you, he spanks you. Yeah, because he knows what's best for me. And it hurts at the time, but it's training. It's teaching me what I should do because he knows he has a better life for me. And that chastening, that correcting, that spanking, it teaches me to do right and it helps me grow. And he's faithful at that. He doesn't slack off. He chastens us because he loves us. He knows what's best for us. He's trying to teach us and correct us. Caleb, look at verse 12 with me, Joshua 14, verse 12. Now therefore give me this mountain. This is Caleb. Give me this mountain whereof the Lord spake in that day. For thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be the Lord will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. What he's saying here, this mountain, this is the best there is. He says, I want the best. Now let me ask you, do you want the best? Do you want the best that God has for you? Do you want the best of God's blessings? Do you want the best for your family, a godly family? Caleb, he wanted the best, but to get the best, he had the toughest task. That's where the giants were, on that mountain. He said, give me your best, even though it's the toughest, even God's with me. I'll take the toughest task because it gets me the best. And if you want the best for your life, you want God's blessings, you want a godly family, you want the best, that's where the harder tasks comes in. It takes dedication. It takes sacrifice. It takes commitment. You want a godly family? It takes commitment to training your kids right. Training them up God's way. You want God's blessings in your life? It means taking time you would spend on other things to go out soul winning. Taking times to live a godly life. Struggling to give up those bad habits and adopting new ones that you're not familiar with, but you know is right. The best requires the toughest task. Some things as Christians that we ought to remember. We have to remember God's promises to us. Like Caleb, God has some promises to us. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. We ought to reflect on that. We ought to remember his promises to us. We ought to remember our own commitments to the Lord. Decisions we made on those days of victory in our past, we ought to reflect back on them. Am I still following that? Am I still applying that in my life? Do I need to recommit to some things? Do I need to change some things now so I can be so I can be like I used to be when I had that victory? We need to remember our own commitments to the Lord, and we need to remember God's faithfulness to us. The story is told of an old Navajo Indian who became rich when oil was found on his property. He took all the money and put it in a bank. His banker became familiar with the habits of this old gentleman. Every so often, the Indian would show up at the bank and say to the banker, grass all gone, sheep all sick, water holes all dry. Without a word, the banker would take the old Indian into the vault, show him several bags of silver dollars, and say, all this is yours. The old man would spend about an hour stacking up the dollars and counting them. Then he'd return the bags to their places, come out of the vault and say, grass all green, sheep all well, water holes all full. You know, when we take the time to remember these things, God's promises, our own personal commitments, and God's faithfulness to us, it changes our outlook on everything. I mean, when we have a problem face us and we don't see, how can we handle this? How can we do this? If we remember what God has done in our past and we take that time, then we turn back to that problem. Oh, that's nothing. God's dealt with bigger in my life personally. It gives us a whole new outlook. This Memorial Day, it's a day of remembrance. As Christians, let's take a few moments on tomorrow and just remember some of these things that God has done for us. Dear Father, thank you for all you've